Hello everybody and welcome to our final webinar within our ITIL 4 series. Today we're going to be talking about the high velocity IT and the direct, plan and improve training modules. I'm Sally and I'm the sales director here at ILX. I'm joined by Alice. Alice works in our marketing department, and I'm also joined by Steve. Steve is an associate trainer of ILX's, and he has a wealth of experience within IT and service management, not only as a practitioner, but also as a trainer and consultant. Before I hand you over to Steve, I've just got a couple of housekeeping bits and bobs that I'd like to run through with you. And apologies if you were attending any of the previous webinars and you're having to go through this for the fourth time, but I'll make sure that I'll get through these as quickly as I possibly can. Firstly, this session is recorded, so if you do need to duck out or you want to forward this recording on to any colleagues, we will be sending you a link to that recording tomorrow via email. Firstly, if you do have any questions and answers, if we can keep those to the end, Alice will read those out and we'll answer as many questions as we can, time permitting. But please do feel free to submit those questions as we go through the webinar. There's a question box to the right hand side of your screen, so you can submit those as we go through the session today. Secondly, if you can, please mute yourselves so there isn't any sort of sound that is disrupting the rest of our listeners. That would be much appreciated. And if you're not already doing so, please do follow us on any of these social platforms. We share a wealth of information, whether or not it's a blog or thought leadership or promotions. We're constantly providing information that we share on these platforms. And then last but not least, you will receive a feedback form as soon as this session has ended. So please do provide us some feedback so we can continually improve these sessions and you get the most out of them. So that's it from me for now. I'll talk to you towards the end of the session, but I'd like to hand you over to Steve. So thanks and enjoy the session.
Okay, thank you, Sally. Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Steve, as you can see there. A little bit of a bio about myself. Sally rightly says I've been around the block a little bit and I've seen certain things from an ITIL perspective that work very well, not so well. And as a project manager, I have a wealth of experience in that space too. Quite useful for me, actually, the fact that my Agile and ITIL training experience has actually come together through these courses, because we're now finding there's quite a lot of crossover in these frameworks. Prince 2 was out there leading the way for project management, but very quickly Agile thinking came into the mixture. ITIL led the way for service management, and again DevOps came along to add some agility into the way things were delivered. So what you tend to find now, of course, is all the courses we're covering at the ITIL intermediate level are all now taking on board those learnings that have been gathered over the years in the spheres of DevOps, Lean, Scrum, and Agile. And you do find lots of references being thrown in that actually do add a lot of value on the journeys. Anyways, guys, here are the two courses we're going to cover over the next 20 or so minutes here. The idea is to give you guys a feel for what's actually in the courses and what you'll gain from them. We're going to introduce you to the concepts of, first of all, high velocity IT. And as the name implies, it's doing things at speed, which is Agile, where Scrum can sometimes give you some value, but also direct, plan and improve, where we need to look at the direction being given to the IT service management teams from the board, but also what methods are out there that will help them do more advanced planning, more complete planning, and also improvement. How can we actually get improvements into the service offerings? So we'll explain to you the contents, the headline concepts, but also, folks, what's different and what's the same. As Sally rightly said, there's questions and answer session at the end, so if you could hang on till then, please, and we'll address any questions you may have at that point. Now, some of you may have seen these diagrams before, and I just grouped these together into just one slide. You've got there 4 key concepts which are always going to be covered on any intermediate course. Top left-hand corner, we've got our friend there, the service value chain. That sits in the middle of the the service value system, and that sits in the middle there is the service value chain, which is just to the right-hand side. Now, those concepts are always investigated with every intermediate course, and they're always considered against the backdrop of the 4 dimensions of service management, which is what you see in the bottom left-hand corner: organization and people, information technology, partners and suppliers, and processes and value streams. And these are fundamental concepts that permeate throughout the world of ITIL 4. The guiding principles you see, the bottom right-hand corner, and there are 7 of those mentioned here in ITIL 4. And those of you familiar with ITIL Practitioner in version 3 will be aware that there's 9 of those, and any agile person in the room here will be aware that there's 12 of those. A principle is something that represents embedded behavior, where we're looking for a natural way of working, where we don't think twice about doing something. Things like focus on value. Everything we do has got to deliver value to the customer. Who defines it? The customer. So we keep that sacrosanct, the forefront of our thinking with everything that we do. When you look at the other ones down there, you'll see there's things like start where you are, try to recycle. As a principle, you don't want to reinvent the wheel all the time. Collaborate, promote visibility. Collaboration is a central agile principle. And again, these are all woven into the way that ITIL 4 is now offering guidance. So the guiding principles are there to embed behaviors which may not be natural to some people, but they need to become natural in the world of ITSM. So, high velocity IT. I've heard it called many things in the past. Agile on steroids, sorry, ITIL on steroids, agile on steroids. It's a way of delivering change very quickly into the ITSM community. It has relevance all the way across the value chain, as you can see. On the left-hand side, there is the demand. On the right-hand side, there's the value being expected by the customer, who defines value, and then the products and services that facilitate the outcomes that enable that value to be achieved are there in that little blue cube. But then the 6 activities you see in the middle there, that's the value chain. And it's that sometimes may need to run at a faster pace or a speedier pace to deliver and meet certain pressures from the marketplace. If you look at the way we've changed over the last year, here we are delivering training courses now in Zoom and GoToTraining, WebEx, and so on. There are so many platforms out there which we wouldn't have considered before, but now, of course, they're part of our lives. How quickly did companies change their way of working using something like this, where they consider the outcomes and the best value to be delivered quickly? So we're looking here to try and work out how we can speed up the delivery of value to our customers, where time to market and time to customer, time to compliance is very important. What the course introduces is a number of key concepts. And again, I'm not going to explain all these to you guys here on the course, but these are typically the sort of things we'll be investigating, like what is a digital organization? Well, it's one that's looking to move its operations into the digital realm. So taking a training course from being a classroom-based to an online delivery, for example, is one example of that. The speed with which we have to move at, how quickly are we pressured in the marketplace to move? And again, we've got to consider various factors like the customer experience, the user experience, but also the supplier and support experience too. What does it mean by digital transformation? Well, digital transformation is when you're taking something that would have been delivered, as I said earlier, in a physical realm. Let's take, for example, DVDs. I mean, how many of us here use Netflix? Quite a lot of us do. So we're using a digital product, and of course they took those products and made them available through a digital platform. IT transformation, though, is what supports that. And along with the operational side of things, the digital transformation is achieved. And of course, when we go out there to the customers, we have digital products to offer. And digital technology is the facility of or the facilitation, should I say, of those digital products in the marketplace. So digital products are quite important in the world of HVIT. And what we find is that there's a life cycle that's slightly different to the customer journey that we normally take. We're looking to speed things up. So therefore, some of the interactions and some of the activities are actually truncated or merged. We also look as well in this course, and we'll show you a slide in this later on, about the appropriateness of using HVIT. High velocity IT is not for everybody. Your culture may be against you. You may be the source of funds may be against you. The resources are against you. So it's not one size fits all, but again, we try and make it a positive experience for those who attend the course, that these are the things you're looking out for, and these are the success factors you're looking for in using this new way of working. There are quite a few principles which HVIT throws into our mindset, which wasn't there previously. And how do we deliver value? Well, we have a few slides on this to show you some of the practices and some of the techniques that might be useful to you when we go into that area. So the life cycle we talk about for a digital product, it's slightly different to the customer journey we looked at on the DSV, the Driving Stakeholder Value course. There were 7 activities, all to do with onboarding a customer. But when you're working at high velocity, you sometimes have to take out some of those activities. We're left here with 5 key activities. Obviously, the exploration of what the customer is looking for. That's going to be cyclical, and you can probably tell that from the way that diagram's shown to you there. It's part of a cycle, an iterative cycle. So the exploration happens where most value is delivered first, and then we move on. Maybe the customers might need to be picked up, certain customers might be excluded or not considered, certain products, certain requirements. We have to go through the exploration to make sure we're delivering something that's going to deliver value at speed. Onboarding, how to bring people on board quickly, sign up for things. And I'm sure we've all done this ourselves. By using our mobile phones or our tablets, we've signed up to applications. I mean, this morning I signed up to an exercise app. It's going to give me access to 9 different workout routines. Cost me £18 for the year, but it was done like that. My experience was actually quite smooth. And that's the sort of onboarding experience we're looking for here. Co-creation of value, again, that's going to happen at several points on the journey of the product. We need to consider those. And again, in the course, we investigate the different phases of value realization. Offboarding, customers come, customers go, but it doesn't mean it's the end of our engagement with that customer. And again, this particular course here is accepting that high velocity IT will have turnover, but it's never forever. There's always a possibility we can onboard that customer again in the future. But sometimes they do go. So we need to consider these 5 steps in the digital product lifecycle, which is slightly truncated from the customer journey that we saw on driving and delivering stakeholder value. Oops, seem to have jumped a slide there, my apologies. Some of the principles that we look into, and again, we're introducing ideas that are not natural bedfellows with IT, but they are bringing about some support for people wanting to move and change the way in which they're working in IT. I mean, ethics is a cracking example. What does ethics represent? It's a system, series of principles by which people start to deliver and judge what's good in their particular realm. So, for example, sustainability is a good example of this. And again, when we're delivering a product at high velocity, we shouldn't overlook those things. They can become constraints, but sometimes they can become very useful benefits long term. So we consider ethics as a key part of this. Safety culture is also new. Safety culture is encouraging, I won't say whistleblowing, but people do need to feel safe in the environment that they're working in. And if they see that something isn't right, it's not quite as it should be, or maybe something's been done wrong against the customer's wishes, they should be free to express themselves. So safety culture talks about people's concerns and the environment in which they work. Lean culture is not to be confused with lean. We're trying to create a learning culture in an organization here. So we're trying to create trust and respect, curiosity even. I actually saw in the book when I was going through the materials here, playfulness was mentioned, which doesn't sound right, but I know what they're getting at. They're trying to get away from the pressures of working in a very rigid way, where you become curious and you want to explore. And that creativity actually can present other opportunities and benefits elsewhere. The Toyota Kata, don't be worried about the name there, folks. You don't leave the training course with a Toyota Corolla, but what you do leave with is an understanding of the scientific culture and nature and learning that goes on in that particular way of working and its relevance to delivering an IT product. I mean, there are terms out there, the and-on cord, which some of you may have heard of. They actually use it in Toyota in Derbyshire, the Burnston plant. If they ever discover a mistake, somebody pulls a big chain down and it just stops the production line. And if the mistake has been identified, has been caused somewhere else, they'll go and fix it. If somebody's caused it here, just purely due to, I don't know, inefficiencies or incompetence, they'll address it there. But they will address the mistake and learn and move on. And the Toyota Kata does introduce the idea of the Deming cycle into our thinking as well, which some of you are probably already aware of. I think we all know what lean represents. Lean is all about identifying waste, removing waste, streamlining activities, processes. Agile thinking is looking at quicker ways of delivering things, looking at making things smaller, more incremental, looking at iterative development and learning as we go. Resilience, that's a new one. That's come out of the DevOps world. DevSecOps is introduced, where we try to take some of the assurance elements more left field in the process flow. So rather than waiting until we get to the operations space, we go more towards the dev space, and we consider security as an earlier requirement than a later one. The continuous mindset that goes on here, again, is from the DevOps world, continuous integration, continuous deployments and delivery. So we never stand back waiting for things that are all the time being released. There are various SMEs, subject matter experts in this world. And if you ever look on YouTube at Ranger 4, some of their learnings, they're talking there about delivering change into the marketplace, into a service at the rate of 1 every 7 seconds, 1 every 13 seconds. It's a very small window of delivering change, so it's continuously being deployed. The service dominant life cycle is, again, just trying to bring about the idea of a win-win service where there are benefits for both provider and the customer, again, to a degree co-creating value for both parties, but it just brings it more into a different line of thinking. Design thinking, again, talks more about the customer experience, the user experience, making sure we understand the dimensions from both sides. And the complexity thinking is a new method, a newer concept here for a lot of people, where there are different levels of complexity that we need to consider. Now, when we start to look at high velocity IT producing things at speed, and we're making use of these concepts and these models, and these do work, we're going to ask ourselves, though, what's the value that we're actually going to get from this? Now, value is delivered by the service to the customer, and as part of the ITIL framework, there are 34 practices out there which will help us. What we cover on this course is we look at the 5 objectives that are associated with delivering digital products, namely, are they valuable, and some of the techniques that might support you in making that decision. So, for example, here, the practices that are most relevant are portfolio and relationship, but they'll help you establish the idea of this thing called the MVP, minimum viable product, and A/B testing is another concept that's out there as well. Fast development is, as the name implies, delivering quicker than before, and again, it makes use of certain practices. But you'll see there's a number of techniques which they call upon. I mean, I've mentioned already CI and CD, continuous integration and continuous delivery. Kanban is a very powerful method, but also the culture we're trying to get across here. And you see that blameless post-mortems. I'm sure in days gone by, we've all been in meetings where there's the hunt for the guilty when things go wrong at the end. And realistically, those meetings are now, they're so last year. What we're now trying to do, of course, is learn from those experiences. A mistake is an opportunity to learn. We talk also about resiliency being added into our operations here. You'll see they're talking about the warranty processes here in the main. Availability, capacity, continuity gets a mention as well on the course, so it's not in that list there. But they also introduce to you a number of concepts which might not be familiar to you, but they are still nonetheless adding some lines of thinking that might not be there previously. Chaos engineering, in case you're wondering there, that's Netflix. Netflix introduces all to the idea of the simian army, where you've got chaos monkey, doctor monkey, janitor monkey. That's what they used to call them. And what they used to do is try and create an instance of chaos, and then to try and see how well do you support yourselves and address the issue quickly and restore the service. You'll see also there as well, they've got version control, which has been around for years. Definition of done, it's a Scrum concept. So all of these methods are out there supporting us in achieving that objective and making sure that what we produce at high velocity isn't just delivering the features that are wanted, but also they'll be supported well. And of course, value has got to be delivered by both sides, but also we've got to consider the user as well. They don't define requirements, customers do, but they still need to be factored into the mindset. And finally, conformance. There's always checks and balances at the end of everything. And again, we've got some techniques here again to call upon. I have mentioned already DevSecOps. We have audit defense in there as well. And these are concepts that you would never have heard of ordinarily, but they are very important, very powerful for delivering a service at speed. So the HVIT course, High Velocity IT, you can see that the skills of the knowledge there talks about the digital organization, how fast we can get things out there, where time to market, time to customer, time to change, and speed are all crucial. And again, we keep emphasizing the terms and going through the jargon to make sure that people are fully prepared and also thinking consistently. There's an exam at the end of this, of course, and a lot of the techniques will be tested, but so will the jargon and the terms, the key concepts. HVIT is not for everybody. So again, we do have checklists where we go through with people discussing what's right for you, what's wrong for you, what risks are you facing. And that's another thing that we need to be aware of. Risk management, where does that come into play? Well, the second course we have available here is DPI, Direct, Plan and Improve. And you'll find that the inputs for these courses come from 2 of the key concepts which I've mentioned to you already. So we talk about the service value system, here it is, and in the middle there you'll see there's governance. I say in the middle, just a little bit above the middle, is the governance, where we find the direction and control is provided for delivering the service. Now, governance for a lot of people is hassle. Governance has a role to play. It's transparency, it's accountability, it's being seen to do things in the right way. And we need to have that direction provided. And of course, risk management is a key part of that, because governance is trying to make sure we do things properly. The direction comes from the value system. And when we start looking at the plan and improve, that comes from the value chain, which sits in the middle of the value system. So how do we plan effectively? What improvement approaches are out there that we can make use of? Because you never stand still. If you stand still, you stagnate. You become irrelevant. I started my IT life off with Lotus Notes, Lotus Domino. And when the millennium came around, it died off. And if I'd have just stuck with Lotus Notes, I wouldn't be sitting here today. I'd be irrelevant. I'd have no value. And we've got to keep our eyes on the improvement opportunities that are out there, how to gather them, how to assess them, how to capitalize on them. So the key concepts, and again, we'll go through these on the following slides here, but quite a few of those terms there. What is direction? Who provides it? Where does it come from? What does it mean to plan? Are we talking about just certain levels of plan, or are we looking at all types of plan? This course looks at all types of plan. How to capture improvement opportunities, how to rank them, how to prioritize them, how to assess them, how to deliver them. Those two combine. What's an operating model? And again, we'd look into that. We'd explain that to you all on the course, make sure it was prepared for the exam around that area. And of course, there's loads of methods out there that'll help us identify improvement opportunities, methods we can use in planning, but also methods that'll help us establish risk, the boundaries of risk, how to deal with risk, and also what controls do we need to put in place around scope. Now, when you start looking at the differences that you see listed there, again, there are some definitions out there which may need to be challenged. Vision and mission. I mean, there's one article I remember finding on the BA Wiki website, Business Analysis Wiki, and it's called VMost, and it talked about vision and mission, objectives, strategy, and tactics. And when you start seeing that flow, it makes sense. The vision is the postcard from the future. It's your aspirational position, and the mission is what's going to motivate you towards that vision. The strategy might be several approaches you might take to achieve that vision. The tactics, they're the projects, the programs that might actually facilitate it. And then in the middle there, you have your objectives. The objectives are the goals, the strategy and the tactics are working towards. But we've also got operations mentioned here as well. When we start talking about timescales in ITIL, there are three main ones: strategic, tactical, and operations. But when it comes to risk, we look at things slightly differently. Governance, there's lots of references to governance in this course. Obviously, that's the direction we're looking for. And most governance is focused around compliance with acts and regulations of the day. I mean, ISO 20000, ISO 27000. I mean, these are all regulations out there that people must comply with in order to achieve certain sales objectives, revenue objectives, compliance objectives, you name it. There are objectives coming out of objectives sometimes for these ISO regulations. But if we want to retain our status and our credibility in certain areas, then we must comply. What's a policy? Well, policies represent some form of documentation of intended behaviors, management expectations, and so forth that will drive us in how we carry out the activities of delivering a service and indeed managing that service. So again, we'll have examples of how good policies get assembled because they provide direction. Controls. I mean, a lot of people see the word control and straight away they're thinking of, have I done this? Will I get charged for this? Will I get penalized for this? Am I in control of my environment? The truth is, folks, a lot of people look at control from the wrong dimension altogether. Control isn't about being held accountable. Control is all about being informed. I bank with First Direct, and my wife and I get a text from First Direct telling us what's the balance, what transactions are going out, what's our balance like to be at the end of the day. If we're in the red, we'll transfer some money from the savings account. If we're in the black, we'll leave it alone. We're informed. And then the action we take based on that information is what makes us appear in control. And that's the key thing here. And controls are all about checks and balances, information flows that facilitate you. Guidelines, recommendations, best practice, and there's plenty of that around the DPI course. Some techniques are more valuable than others. And again, they do go through the more valuable ones on the course, but they do reference also those that are worth investigating when you leave. Measurement and reporting. Well, one of the key things to do with controlling any service is to understand where you are. You can't manage what you don't understand. You can't manage what you can't visualize and see. So dashboards, for example, in service centers and data centers are often a very good way of showing you where you've got hotspots on clusters, for example, or on a service desk, showing you what the performance of the desk is like in key areas. Again, we'll discuss this because you need to improve based on the evidence that's coming your way, and metrics and measurements are a key source of MI, management information, that facilitates improvements. Anyways, we'll talk our way through that now, folks. Let's look at this. This is another concept that will be covered on the course in some detail too, and that's the cascading objectives. Well, we need to consider all parties who could be involved in service management in terms of consumption, in terms of delivery, in terms of support on a daily basis, in terms of recommendations and improvements. But what we also need to do, of course, is make sure that any cascading objectives are tracked and monitored, because quite often things go into the ether and we never see where they go after that. And of course, management's then held accountable if things aren't delivered. So how do we make sure that our scope of control is in place so we know the boundaries of what it is we're controlling, but also where there might be something called scope of influence as well. And again, the influence might be from a number of sources. It could be from senior management who are looking at certain longer term objectives. It might also be from people at the operations level who are encountering certain pressures on a daily basis. You never know. So we cover those concepts again on the course: scope of control, scope of influence, and the policies, the controls, and the guidelines that facilitates that. You'll see GRC mentioned on this course quite a bit as well, because governance is a key part of it. It drives the direction and control. But as I said to you earlier, when we start talking about the governance and the risk side of things here in particular, there's a slightly different perspective. Now, I look at strategic risks as being generally, 2 years to 5 years. The word I'd be using against strategic risks is portfolio risks, the big picture stuff. Programs and projects is what make a portfolio, and the medium-term space typically could be, 6 weeks to 2 years even, who knows. And the operational stuff, of course, is the day-to-day stuff. And there are risks that are going to pop out from all of those levels, and they all need to be managed and handled at different levels with different mitigation approaches, different tracking. Active management needs to be applied at all 4 levels there. And of course, if you don't look after your risks, that's a key failing of governance. And again, if you're providing an IT service, if you have ISO 20000 accreditation, then you'll need to provide some evidence that governance is actually at work. And there are again various structures and responsibilities to consider. The board of directors are the ones who specify the objectives up front. They provide the leadership in terms of what represents governance. They're the ones who are reporting to stakeholders, the second stakeholder. And they're the ones who appoint the board of directors in the first place, but they also appoint the audit committee too. And of course, the audit committee then will report to the directors so that they can issue instructions and show leadership where it needs to be shown. Within those responsibilities, there's quite a bit of circularity going on there, lots of connections and lots of iteration as well. We cover all of this on the course for you. Now, some of you will have seen this previously. If we are going to take information that comes from the environment and try and make some sense of it and do something with it, we're going to be using something like this. This is the continual improvement model. Now, some of you may have seen this on version 3. The continual improvement model has 6 core activities which take place. You work your way down them. And those activities may make use of some of the assessment methods you see mentioned there on the left-hand side, like gap analysis. For example, what is the vision? Where are we now? Where do we want to be? What's the gap? How can we address it? Maybe SWOT analysis. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats may be a way of recovering that gap, but also there may be things you need to consider when you're planning where you want to be. So as you work your way down those activities there in the center, you'll see the techniques on the left-hand side may be quite supporting. Also, you'll find a key central plank that's never mentioned really until we get onto the HVIT course and DPI course, is the need for a business case. Every change, every improvement, every new service has to have some form of justification. So we look at the business case, how to communicate that business case with various stakeholders, how to advocate the messages of the business case. That's also important too. Making sure that the business case is maintained across its life cycle for the improvement. And of course, there are reviews, as you'll see there in the improvement model on the far left-hand side of that diagram. How do we keep the momentum going? Well, that's always triggered by the last activity. Did we get there? Assessing the improvement's effect. Is it worth proceeding with any further? or canning it. But none of this is going to work, of course, until you embed a culture of improvement in people's mindsets across the organization. People have got to feel that they can contribute. And again, safety culture, which was mentioned earlier, brings about the idea of people being willing to offer improvements. And it creates a more dynamic environment, a faster environment too. And also it means that opportunities don't get overlooked. When we're dealing with improvement opportunities, we'll also be considering on this course as well key stakeholders and the interaction with the organization change model. Organizational change management deals with the human side of change, the bigger picture stuff. Also, when you need buy-in from the organization to facilitate improvements in an IT service, you do need to call upon certain stakeholders. And this little model here, which some of you might recognize as being very similar to Hersey Blanchard, it looks at 4 groupings of stakeholders and how we work with them and engage with them. Like the critical people are the ones you got to fully engage with, the ones you manage closely. They've got high influence and they've got high power. The major stakeholders, again, these are the ones that must be satisfied. These are people who might be sponsors. They might not want to be too worried about what's being produced. They want to see the results without actually knowing how you're going to get there. Then you might have people who've got high interest, keep informed. They could be auditors. Now, these are people who could be quite critical to shutting you down if you don't comply. And finally, the minor stakeholders, it's not a nice phrase to use that, but these are people who need to be involved at a lower communication level, perhaps a website, some sort of bulletin board or posting notification, something of that nature. So the comms and OCM, as we call it there, is important. Value streams are also a key part of the improvement cycle too. When we talk about value streams here, we're talking about the activities that are pulled together to deliver value for customers in the form of products and services. And this is here, this is the path we have for a new service coming on board. Now we have an engage activity, followed by a plan. We go into the design and transition. We start building it. We then post it in design and transition and confirm it's what the customer wants. It goes live. It gets delivered and supported. Refinements are being sought and looked after. It comes back for further improvements. It goes back out live. That's the typical cycle for a new product, typical value stream we're looking for. But do we have to follow it through in that order? And could we speed up some aspects of that? On the left-hand side there are some key techniques which might be useful. Lean is never far away from our thinking. Looking at waste, muda, as the Japanese call it. Can we eliminate certain tasks and activities? Leading and lagging indicators. A leading indicator is one that pushes you, gives you direction. A lagging indicator is the result of what's happened after the change. We need to consider that. Process metrics. If you look at the incident life cycle, that's a process in its own right. We can look at how long it takes for each activity and therefore look at the process's timeline. Can we speed up some activities? Can we speed up some parts of the process? Again, it's a technique. Flow efficiency, bottlenecks, and so on. I'm not going to bore you with all the other stuff in that list there, folks, but I would say to you that value stream mapping is the one area from DevOps that you will find very, very useful here when you're looking at value streams. Other things that might be useful as well when we're considering it, and we do cover these on the course, and again, it's just more reassurance that we're bringing more agile thinking into our way of working here, folks. We try and avoid local optimization and look at thinking and acting holistically. And again, that's something that typically happens. So how do we stop bottlenecks like that occurring? How do we design things more efficiently? What should we consider when presenting a service design document? The Theory of Constraints. Eliyahu Goldratt produced this book. I've never read the text version of it because it's quite thick and I haven't got much patience for it, to be honest with you. But there's a book out there, a graphic novel called The Goal, and it summarizes everything in there. And basically we're looking at blockers, things that stop us achieving things, and take those constraints away, overcome those constraints, you speed things up. Kanban, which is what you see here. Now the Kanban board you see there is very basic. It has a backlog, which is typically what you see in the first column. The build column comes next, then the test column, and then the deploy column. And you'll see there the different colored post-its there indicating different priorities. Maybe red means must have, green means could have, who knows. Anyways, folks, these are additional methods that we use to try and improve the value stream. And again, they're calling upon the agile world. What do you get from the course? Well, the skills and knowledge, of course, to make improvements. Again, try and improve not just one aspect of the IT service provision, but all areas. How can you leverage value from any area, any improvement that you're putting forward? Value streams are never going to be overlooked in this course. It's a key part of it. We're delivering value for customers, so we need to understand how it works. but also who we're involving, the stakeholders, making sure we communicate with people and manage them effectively. And you see that at the very bottom there, new techniques that ordinarily might be seen to be the province of other frameworks, they're equally relevant and at home in the ITIL world. Now, there are exams at the end of both of these courses, HVIT and DPI, along with CDS, that's Create, Deliver and Support, and Driving Stakeholder Value. They all have the same format, namely it's a 90-minute exam. You've got 40 questions. Each question is worth 1 mark, but you've got to get 70% or higher to pass. 90 minutes for 40 questions, as you can probably imagine then, there's some text to be read and interpreted. It's looking at things from a how do we achieve this perspective rather than what's involved perspective. It's a much more involved, much more creative exam to go through, but also very passable. The 2 points at the bottom here, folks, are really if you're doing the exam online, which most people these days are doing, you will need photo ID, and that's a no-brainer. You've got to have that these days. Driving license, passport. If you work in government departments, then your work ID there is probably as good as a passport in some respects internally. But also hardware that you take the exam on needs to be checked in advance too. And you do find in some organizations, security policies sometimes prevent the exam being run. So we just need to check that out too in advance. Just giving you a heads up there on that last one there. That's been quite a big issue of late. The exams themselves, well, again, the format of the exams, you'll see that at the bottom of that diagram there, we have our friend ITIL Foundation. Everyone has to do that, and there is no upgrade exam from version 3 to version 4. We all have to do ITIL 4 Foundation, including people like me who teach the stuff. But then you'll see on the left-hand side, that blue bar across the top there gives you the ITIL Managing Professional designation. So you're moving now towards the ITIL Expert of old. But there are 4 courses you'll see you have to take in addition to Foundation to get there. Now, Sally will be talking to you about some of the offers available from ILX later on around these 2 streams, but each course that you see there is a separate self-contained course. So Create, Deliver and Support, Driving Stakeholder Value, High Velocity IT, they're all sitting there in the professional stream. You'll notice that Direct, Plan and Improve in navy blue or dark blue, that's also part of the Management Professional designation, but it also feeds into the Strategic Leader designation as well. So it's actually quite a powerful course to take, that one, if you're going to do both of those designations. In terms of which order should you do the Managing Professional courses, CDS first, Create, Deliver and Support, Driving Stakeholder Value second. It has been suggested doing Direct, Plan and Improve next, because then High Velocity IT draws upon those 3 courses as part of the content and the syllabus. The final exam there on the right-hand side, Digital and IT Strategy, or DITS as it's become known, that one is the one that's been changed around in terms of its layout and its delivery. You've now got to pass an exam, but also you've got assignments to complete to the satisfaction of an assessor before you're then granted that particular exams pass. And add those 2 together, the designation of Strategic Leader will go with you. And of course, if you take those 2 designations, Managing Professional and Strategic Leader, you become an ITIL Master. And I have no idea what that entails. And neither do Axelos either. They haven't told us yet. So I don't think there's an ITIL Master in existence yet, but that's where they'd like us all at some point to go. The small little box on the left-hand side there, folks, and this question might pop up later on. If you've come from a version 3 background and you have ITIL Expert already, or you have 17 points from the exams that have been taken already, then you will be able to just take that one course, one exam. Now that's the route that I took myself, because I've been around in the ITIL world since version 2. And I'll be honest with you, I thought there's an awful lot of material to get through. And I mean, the ILX materials helped me immensely because it was all detailed in the right place, which was fantastic. But there's a lot of content. So you might find if you've already gone down that road with ITIL 3, then one exam might just be the ticket for you. Who knows? Anyways, folks, you've heard an awful lot from me. Time for Sally to have a chat with you.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Steve. That's great. So very quickly, before we hand over to questions and answers, if you are considering doing any of the ITIL 4 training courses within the scheme, they're all available to take at ILX. For all of our listeners, we're offering a 30% discount on any of the e-learning courses. We also provide the courses in virtual delivery, so it all depends on your learning preference. So you can take it as a self-paced e-learning course, or you can take it virtually where you will attend with other delegates, and we deliver the class via a learning platform. As Steve mentioned earlier, the only course that isn't available at the moment is DIT, the Digital IT Strategy course, but that should be available to take probably around sort of April, end of April time. All the other courses are available now. So again, you know, if you're looking to run anything in-house, you have a cohort, a group of learners, please do reach out and speak to us. There's some details here on this slide. Contact us is a great email to contact us to ask about any inquiries that you may have. So I think that's it from us. So we're now going to hand over to you all to see if you have any questions. Alice, have we received any yet? Usually it takes a little while for those to come through.
Yeah, we've had a couple through. I mean, if anyone has any questions, please do send them through now. But the first one we've had is this content related to foundation or managing professional or both?
It sits in between the two, actually. Managing professional is the designation you'll get when you pass all 4 exams. Both these courses are part of that designation. You need to do the foundation first, and there are elements of the foundation course that are revisited on HVIT and DPI, the service value system, the value chain, the guiding principles, and so on. So you do actually go a bit further in your application of those concepts on these courses from the foundation course you do. So in both areas, what I'm trying to say to you.
Cool. Thank you. And the second, and actually only other question we've got currently, is how would this content, the content of this training, be relevant to implementation of larger projects such as ERP, which I think is enterprise resource planning, and other in a large complex organization?
The direct plan improved certainly will be of more direct value, because if something big needs to have input from senior people as well as from planners and more operational focused people. So there's definitely going to be, the scale of involvement will depend upon the size of the project we're dealing with, but the concepts of DPI are very, very relevant to that sort of project straight away in terms of what it needs to look like, what it needs to be delivering, how it needs to be managed and governed. HVIT, that can introduce a number of concepts which might be relevant to certain aspects of delivery. So down at the team level, you may find some HVIT input, but you may also find as well certain digital products which are produced as part of any of those big projects might also benefit from HVIT too. If you're looking to, if your culture is right in your organization for working in an agile way, HVIT is a good fit. If your resourcing is there, the resistance is low, HVIT is a good fit. But if it's a very structured hierarchical organization, then maybe HVIT might not be the best approach. But everyone is responding faster these days to the pandemic and the world we're living in, and I find it hard really to justify why somebody wouldn't want to think and work in that way, personally.
Thank you, Steve. Someone's asked, is DPI equivalent to CSI? What's the acronym?
That's good. Ooh, yes. Yeah, CSI is Continual Service Improvement in version 3, and they've taken the service element out of that title now in version 4. DPI looks at CSI, but it also goes further. So it touches on some of the strategy aspects which you'd have dealt with in version 3 as well. The planning, the direction, the governance, your portfolio gets a good mention in ITIL 4, in that one of those objects I mentioned there, excuse me. So you'll certainly find some crossover between those two version 3 courses, but it's not a straight lift of CSI into DPI. There's a lot more besides.
Great. A quick question for Sally. What's the total cost of foundation and the managing professional bundle? I think they're trying to say.
The managing, yes, so the total cost for the ITIL 4 foundation bundle is £2,800, but that's not including your 30% discount, and that includes your exams and also the official manual. So you need to take your 30% off your 2,800, and that's what the cost will be for whoever the inquirer is.
Cool. Thank you, Sally. Another question for Steve. What would be your recommended reading on the theory of constraints? I think you did mention a book, but I might have missed it.
I did, yeah. It's only a personal recommendation, I must stress here, but we get given that many books to read as part of our teaching, and Goldratt's book, The Theory of Constraints, was actually quite thick and it was very textual, and I go to sleep sometimes and read those. But the one that I found was very useful for me to get the message across was a graphic novel called The Goal. It's actually based on Goldratt's book, actually. In fact, I think he's the author. Just bear with me 1 second.
Got one to hand?
Not sure if you're going to see it here, folks, but there it is.
No.
Oh no! Do you know, isn't that a nightmare? I put it against my chest. There we are. There it is. You can get it on Amazon actually, and it actually is quite an easy read, and it also covers the main topics and concepts in a very applicable way. That's the book that I found most useful. I just don't like writing big, thick books, and Goldratt's book was quite big. The Theory of Constraints.
Thank you, Steve. Where does IT operations fit in CDS and HVIT and DPI? That's another question.
Well, certainly it fits inside CDS. The operations space looks at that core CDS, really. If I was to go back to version 3's lifecycle, that's where service design, service transition, and service ops sits. So that's the most relevant course for the operations. When you're looking at driving stakeholder value, you're looking at more to do with strategy and more to do with senior involvement. So relationship management, for example, is a main thrust. Portfolio management. So not so much on the operations side. HVIT definitely, because you're looking to be very collaborative in the way you're delivering things, working in an agile way at speed. And again, the same thing for DPI, because you are needing to improve things. And where would those improvements come from? They could well come from the operations space. So I think there's relevance in all those areas for the operations sphere. But the two I think that are most relevant, most directly relevant, are CDS, definitely CDS, and HVIT, I think most certainly. But we work in a collaborative world now, so you'd have to really have a very good reason to exclude operations from any of those courses. They've got value to offer in all 4 areas.
Brilliant. And then another question actually from the same person off the back of that. Is there a sequence to CDS, DSV, DPI, and HVIT?
There's nothing advertised by Axelos. It's only because I mix with people who teach as well, and there's somebody I've got an awful lot of respect for. His opinion counts a lot for me. And he was saying that when he was being asked the same question, he was saying start with CDS first, DSV comes second, and that gives you a life cycle mentality then. After that, DPI to take the life cycle to the next level, and then do HVIT last. So CDS first, DSV, DPI, and then HVIT last, because that draws on the other 3, does HVIT, and you don't want to be learning new stuff, you want to be adding to what's already there, and it kind of makes sense from what you were saying.
Okay, cool. And then another question for Sally, actually. Does ILEX provide official books for manuals, I suppose, for CDS, DSV, HVIT, DPI?
Yes, yeah, we provide manuals for all of them. Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. That's currently all the questions. I'll give it a couple of extra minutes. Oh no, there's another one, sorry. Someone's asking, from the sequence you just referred to, Steve, they're asking if DSV should be first or not.
I suppose it depends where you're coming from, to be fair, because there's no crossover, obvious crossover in place between them. CDS is transition, design, and operations. And if you're working there, then that would be the logical one to start with. But if you're working the senior management role, or you're working at a more senior level, then DSV may be the one to go for. If you're working in an accounts role or a BRM type role, then DSV would be a better one to start with. So it's not one size fits all. It just depends what your position is and where you get the most value from the first course. But you would need to cover off both of those at some point if you're doing the management professional designation. It's up to you, whichever you feel happiest with, but I'd do those 2 first before I do DPI, if I was honest.
Brilliant. And we've got a few more questions coming in, I think for Sally this time. Big question for Sally. What makes ILEX's courses better than other ITIL 4 courses on the market, such as QA?
I would say that in terms of our e-learning, we're probably first class. All of our e-learning is completely interactive. We also put knowledge checks throughout our e-learning, so you're continually checking your knowledge as you go through the learning. Also, we have built-in exam simulators so that you can go and test your knowledge before you go ahead and take the official exam, so that you know when you're ready to take the exam, and that you've got a higher guarantee of passing because you have got an 80% on your exam simulator with ILX. In terms of virtual delivery, again, with huge amounts of experience in delivering virtually, we make it very interactive, and we only use the best-in-class trainers, as you've experienced with Steve, who is obviously one of our lead training consultants for our ITIL 4 suite. So there's some of the key reasons.
Few nuggets for thought there. And related to the trainers, actually, I've got someone asking who our trainers are. I'm not sure what the best way is to answer that, but I'll give that to you, Sally. Who are ITIL trainers?
Who are well, Steve is obviously one of our ITIL trainers. We have another trainer called Peter Farrington. We've a range of trainers. But if you are interested to understand a little bit more about our trainers, please do get in touch with us and we can send you full biographies of our ITIL trainers so that you can understand a little bit about their experience, type of companies that they've worked for, etc., etc. And we would only recommend a trainer that is right for you and your organisation.
Brilliant. And then the final question, I think for now, is just another one on pricing. What are the price of the official books, the manuals for each of the modules?
That is a very good question, and I don't know it off the top of my head. But send us an email and I'll get back to you. Most of the time, people will be taking the actual training course along with the manual, because obviously that's the right approach to make sure that you have got the knowledge, the experience to pass the exam. But we do have a bookstore, so I can send you the link to the bookstore. If you go to the ILX website, and at the bottom of the page, it will link you to our bookstore where you can purchase any of the official manuals.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sally. And that looks like all of the questions for now. So thank you, everyone, sorry, for submitting your questions. I'll just hand back over to you, Sally, to close off.
Well, it's all to say thank you. Thank you for attending today. If you have attended all of the webinars within the ITIL 4 series, I hope you've enjoyed them. I hope you found them informative. I'd like to also say a big thanks to Steve for delivering some really insightful sessions for us and for our listeners. And I'd also like to thank Alice as well for putting these webinars on. Much appreciated. And I hope everyone has enjoyed them and have a great rest of the day. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.